We're back with another episode of Fullback, which is our weekly podcast on all things Barca, with a few stories which we thought were of interest and were talked about the most. One of the starting with our our great run in the Champions League in Europe, and there's ample reason to celebrate that. Then there was obviously the whole drama around Szczęsny and Penia, so we'll touch a little bit upon that. And then with Barca and transfer windows, it's not over until it's over. We've all felt that there was no financial fair play margin to actually bring anybody, though there have been discussions on Rashford, and we've talked about Rashford here as well. Looks like our old friends Manchester City might throw us a lifeline. The word on the street is that they're looking to pick up Nico Gonzalez, a Barca midfielder, and went to Porto and has been performing well. So they want him as a midfielder. And Nico has a transfer clause of release clause about 60 million, of which Barca has a sell-on clause. So, long story short, if that deal happens, Barca do get $24 million. And if they do, they can bring in Rashford. So don't be surprised if at midnight a Rashford appears from somewhere. We'll get to know in the next two days. So that was one more story. Dom, is there anything else I want to talk about?
No, I think that pretty much covers it for this week. It's been a pretty eventful week, as it always is for Barcelona. And I think the Champions League is the biggest talking point at this moment. And we do need this, right? We need this positivity because we should be positive and optimistic as the second place team in the whole group stage. And that's ahead of some teams that are perceived as much better than Barcelona. Credit to Flick and credit to all the boys and that have played, because this is something to be proud of. And now we go into the knockout stages. It's the crunch time where every little detail matters. And we'll see, we do have potentially, I think, unfortunately, we will get PSG because they play Brest, I think. And then the winner of that duel goes to Barca or against Barca. And I think we already know who's going to go through.
I think it will be PSG. And I would rather not have PSG, to be entirely honest. What Luis Enrique has done, I think he's built a really balanced team out there. And that team is actually good. They're also built on youth. They found out the right profiles. They're not shiny names everywhere on the pitch, but they've got good players in every position. Play real attacking football. And against Flick's high line, Barcola, Desiree Doué, Ousmane Dembele, they can feast with our backline and the challenges that we have faced. And it can get difficult, but we said that about Madrid as well. We said that about many teams. The thing is, when you play with Flick and you open up, which is what Lucho will do, there'll be two teams going at each other, and that's interesting and exciting for sure, and there'll be goals for sure. But it does mean that with Flick, when you give that much of space, Barca will score. That will happen. Yeah. So it can go either ways. It won't be that very tactical game that we saw last year with Xavi, which actually Barca played very well, I would think, except for one moment of madness in which we lost the tie and probably sealed Xavi's fate. I think we win that game, we could have gone further deep into Champions League, and Xavi would still be our manager. For a long time, it's been 6-7 years since we have been convincing in Europe. What I liked about this group stage was, yes, we lost a couple of games, sure. Yes, we looked a bit iffy here and there, but 28 goals scored. So I absolutely enjoyed that. And the fact that Flick has made it happen, major kudos to him, because that has changed the complete narrative around the club, around everything. There's a lot of positivity, even in social media. You look, there's a lot of positivity around how people talk about Barca. For years, it was like all the wrong things. So it just goes to show with the change in fortunes and change in perception and the performance, everything can change. All storylines can change. And that's what I've liked so much about this run. It was a convincing, dominating run. Yes, we may lose against PSG, and that might be the end of the season Champions League for us, and maybe that will happen. But we must not make the mistake of not relishing this and not giving it the due credit it deserves, even if we lose. This was a marked change from the Barca we have seen in the last 6 to 7 years.
That's true, and that's a very good point, because the overall outlook of the team, right, the positivity around the team, I think it affects us as fans because we obviously like it when the team is playing good football and entertaining football, but also affects the players and how they perform. And they are in an environment that's nurturing, that's very positive, that's very optimistic in terms of how the future looks, then they will perform at a higher level too. And the psychological part, the mental part of the game is often overlooked, but it's extremely important, especially at these highest levels of the game, where every little advantage you can get matters a lot. So from that perspective, I absolutely agree. This is something that we have to cherish no matter what happens next. But then again, you are Barca, and everyone expects you to keep this on and keep winning this and keep winning silverware, which is ultimately what it comes down to when you're a top team, which Barca are, and they are a brand as well. Now, one point that you made is that we've scored a lot of goals, and that's true. Barca scored more goals than any
It's also a lot.
Yeah, they did. They did. Yeah, we scored more goals than any team, 6 more than the next highest team in the Champions League, actually. But then the data gets funny here. We also conceded more goals than any team in the top 16 of the Champions League. So that tells you, okay, on one hand, Barca definitely out there, definitely one of the contenders. But this other part of the data tells you, okay, maybe not the favorite, maybe.
Enrique he's scouted, he has got the players that he wants, he's built up a collective. And there's some good things. Look at the fitness record of Dembele, right? He's been insanely fit, right? His whole team is extremely fit. Players are full of confidence. They're playing good. Like I saw a couple of games in the Champions League, entertaining football. So it's going to be hard. But Bone, let's hear from you. Who are your keys to the game?
It's exactly what you said. I think in an open warfare kind of game, which has suited Barca so far, PSG are the worst opponent out of the four, right? Because on paper, they're the only ones that can go blow to blow with Barca. If you play an open game and you want to outscore PSG, it will be difficult, right? Because they have the tools, the exact tools they need to exploit the exact flaws that we have. So that's number one. Number two is their team, as you said, is a different team than we're used to seeing. There's a bunch of kids there, a bunch of likable players in there. And I know people have different opinions on Dembele and all that stuff, but he has found himself a bit more just right now. In this moment, he's being the player
that we thought he would be.
Yeah, exactly. And he's showing those signs of quality on a much more consistent basis. And when you have a much more consistent Dembele, that Dembele is devastating. People say he left Barca on bad terms. All that is true, but the quality of the player, it should never have been in question because the quality is there. Now, for one reason or the other, injuries, fitness, inconsistency, all of that was present in Barca, whereas now at PSG, it's much less of that, and it's much more of the good stuff. Unfortunately for us, in case we do end up facing them in the Champions League, because as Dembele against us gets a bit more motivation and he finds that consistency much easier, which is, again, bad news for Barcelona and the setup that we play in.
I just think about that high line and I just think about Araujo, or when I think about Barcola and Dembele running at us.
It's difficult to say because on one hand, if we expect to be on the defensive a lot more, which we do expect to be against PSG, maybe Araujo would be a better choice. But then again, if you're playing an open team, a team that's equally aggressive as you are, distribution from the first line will be equally important because then you can access that space that's being left by PSG, which will be left by PSG. So it's, again, a tactical conundrum for Flick to decide, okay, which do I value more? Do I want to be more incisive in possession or do I want a bit more security out of possession? It's very difficult to say which one is needed more because you'll need a bit of both, obviously, against PSG. But then they do have those players who will hurt us. And I think for Barca, there will be goals, right? There will be goals. But for Barca, it's important they strike first, number one. And number two, that they keep the momentum going. Because if we keep up the momentum, we steamroll teams. If we go into this tit and tat thing with teams, against teams, especially teams like PSG, it can get ugly because then the momentum switches constantly here and there, and then we get goals from both sides. What we want is to keep on rolling that snowball once we get it going, and that's what Barca do best. When they smell blood and when they draw first blood, that's when this Barca, Flick's Barca, is at its best. I think that the goals happen.
The fact of the matter is, if you want to go deep into Champions League, you'll have to play against these teams anyways. There's no escaping. Somewhere you got to just take it on the chin and say, you know what, bring it on, and we'll see what happens. Hopefully it goes our way. But yeah, that's about PSG. Let's cut back to other topics that are much closer to the heart, and let's go into the footballing goalkeeping situation that we have, which is quite interesting. We've got a 34-year-old goalkeeper who could have played but retired. And we've got a young graduate who hasn't been that successful in the last few years, but was finding his feet this season and was performing actually pretty well. Probably his best performance in years. And then suddenly, after Christmas, he's lost his position. And the coach is openly saying that in media. Like, that's so uncharacteristic of to say that in my next game, he's going to be my goalkeeper. He just doesn't do that. So what message does it send to the dressing room and to the player, and how does that put a feel? And the question remains, why? I just would say it's not that Sheji is like lighting the world on fire with his skill sets, at least not to me. I may be missing something. It would seem like Pena was actually quite good and quite decent for the way things were. But for some reason, Flick has decided that he's going to be everywhere and he's now playing all the games and what have you. Now, are there other backstories that we don't know that maybe that's how he signed up? That we don't know what we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's curious what's happening in the goalkeeping situation.
We had talked about the potential goalkeeping matchup. So when Szczęsny was signed, we said, okay, on pure quality, he should edge out Pena, right? Because at that point, Pena was still this very insecure, very shaky goalkeeper that we remember from seasons past, where we considered a bunch of goals in a couple of games, and it was all horrible. It was all end of the world stuff with Pena in between the sticks, right? So at that point, we're like, okay, Szczęsny comes in. When he gets match sharp, he's our starting goalkeeper. But then somewhere along the line, things changed and Pena became more secure. He started coming out of his shell. He started actually contributing with important saves. And he started giving people, the fans, and also I think the players around him a lot more confidence. And that was good signs. And for a while, Flick insisted on Pena. He kept playing him. He kept this dynamic going and everything was good. And Pena was thriving because of that confidence that he had from Flick. Now, in comes Szczęsny for an odd cup game here and there, and he doesn't really light the world on fire, as you said, Dev. And suddenly he still keeps on starting, as he keeps on playing, and as you said, Flick publicly saying, okay, Szczęsny is now the goalkeeper. He's going to be goalkeeper for the next game, whatever. And to me, it's weird because there was no indication, there was nothing suggesting that change should happen. It's not about this player on paper is better than that player. It's about the performance that they've both been putting out. Pena has not put a foot wrong, quote unquote. Maybe he's not been perfect, but he's been really good. And he's been steadily improving, which is even more important. Whereas Szczęsny has made a couple of big errors and he's not been the most prolific goalkeeper. That's what baffles me, right? Something must have happened that we are not seeing. Or maybe in their performances, even, as you said, we don't really know. Maybe something that Flick is seeing from Szczęsny, despite those errors, makes him believe that Szczęsny is a better fit for his style of play.
On the surface of it, doesn't look like Szczęsny has played that much better than Pena for this to happen. And it's not, from a merit perspective, it deserves it over, which is what is bothering the fans, that it doesn't seem merited or deserved for Szczęsny. We all like him, and he's a cool character, but from a football perspective, he hasn't been really doing that much to give that added sense of security. But obviously, Flick is seeing something and has decided to make that decision.
Okay, the final topic, Dev, is actually something from ages past, which is Nico Gonzalez, our former midfielder, who might be going to Manchester City, which is beneficial to Barca because of the clause in his contract, which says that Barca get, 40%, I think, of 40%, which would be a good chunk of money by the end of the transfer window, which would actually give us maybe some room to sign someone.
We sold Unai Hernandez for 5 million. That's pure profit because he's from the academy. And if they get Nico, that's pure profit again. So that's about 24 plus 5, that's 30 million of pure financial fair play in terms of margin, right? So you can actually not sign one, maybe two. So maybe Rashford can happen. And Rashford in Flick's system, I think, will be good. But let's talk about Nico. I still remember the first season with Xavi and that run that we had when we were ninth on the table, and we then went on a run and won a lot of games. And Nico was very instrumental in some of those games for winning, right? Nico, Luke de Jong, these were the ones who kept the lights on, and only real Barca fans will remember that. Yeah. We wanted Nico to become better and bigger than, but Xavi seemed to have lost faith in him, and he left for Porto. Didn't seem he was lighting the stage on fire. But then looks like with what Man City has gone through in this season, they have to completely rebuild their entire team. And Pep Guardiola being Pep Guardiola, he's looking for that profile, the box crash, the physicality, because he's got his team is old. So a youngster like Nico, when coached in the right manner, can become quite efficient tool in the system, right? So I think that's where Guardiola is coming from. And for Nico, it will be an amazing opportunity to go back and be coached by somebody like Guardiola and play for a team like City, who will obviously, again, become better.
There are two schools of thought here, right? Number one is, okay, they buy him and we get some money, we can buy players. It's a win for us because we get more money. But on the other hand, is why did he leave in the first place? Because he seems like a player that we could use ourselves. And yes, you said it. I think in City's squad, they do lack such a profile. He is maybe more of a Frankie de Jong than someone like Bernal Busquets. So maybe that was the clash that Xavi saw, that Barca saw in the profiles, and said, okay, we don't need more of that because we do have Frankie. Maybe they didn't see potential for Nico to actually grow into the player that he would need to grow into to be a very elite Barca player. But then again, it does seem like a missed opportunity for us. And now, unfortunately, we'll see what he can become somewhere else, which is the very this irony of football. But yes, to me, he will do a good job of City because he is a profile they need. He's someone that will be able to replace a part of what Rodri was giving them, right? Because they don't have Rodri and the system collapses. They lose a lot of what he brings defensively and offensively. And Nico, I don't think he's necessarily at the level of Rodri in many of those things. He can fill that gap and be the necessary profile. What I mean by this is that he will come in as a still raw player, and then he will go into Pep's hands, very capable hands, if I may add, that will then hopefully turn him into something that's of the highest level. And then we can be proud as well, and also sad at the same time because he's not with us, but it's also one of our players who's getting the recognition.
One day he will come back.
Maybe he will for 100 million or something ridiculous like that. But yeah, happy for the kid because we did like him and we always spoke highly of him. And we always said, okay, this is a player that can be someone in football.
Let's assume next season Bernal is coming back. So now you have Bernal, you have Casado, you have Petri, you have Gavi. Let's say even Frankie wasn't there. What would be Nico's role in the team? Would he be a regular starter? I don't think so. Even now, isn't he better off from the point of view of his career, of he wanting to play in every game, being an important member of the squad, a starter?
It's all about projecting the profiles. So who can he eclipse? I don't think he eclipses Pedri. No, because the profiles are so different. Then if Bernal continues developing the way he has been, we'll see after injury, right? What happened after injury? But if he does pick up the pace right off the bat and continues that trajectory upwards, then no, Nico would not be a Bernal replacement or someone who can dethrone Bernal in that role. Now, we come to Gavi and Casado and potentially Frankie. If Frankie is not there, then even more so. It's Nico versus Gavi and Nico versus Casado. I think Nico versus Casado favors Nico. I think he does more things better and he's more developed physically as well for the highest level. Now, Nico versus Gavi depends all on Gavi and how Gavi evolves because at the moment, Gavi is still getting back into it. He's not always at his best. And there's a dispute there, right? Who can you value more? Who do you need more? And at the moment, I would say Gavi is maybe a bigger talent. On paper, I think, yes, he still might not be in the starting lineup, but that might as well change. So maybe this move at this stage of his career is a good move for him.
The reality is that he did play a couple of seasons, and while he was there, he tried very hard to make it to the first team. He wasn't a starter at a time when we were in a really shambles. Like we were really the worst of Barca that was there. And even then it was hard for him to become a starter. But he did the right thing. He went to Porto. He found game time. He played. He built up his game. And today he's being called by Man City, which is great. And I think overall it's a win for him. Had he not gone and stayed at Barca, what would have happened? I don't know, to be entirely honest. But to your point, there is no need for a Nico and a Frankie in the same team. Given the fact that we still have Frankie and he's not going anywhere, I think it's okay. We wish him best of. We'll see what happens. And hopefully it happens because then we get some much needed financial remuneration. That said, though, I doubt he's a 60 million player, even though there's a release clause on him. Even though City have billions of dollars and they need release clause, but I just don't think he's a 60 million player yet.
You pay more for the projected talent, right here at this stage, and also the fact that they need to activate the release clause. That's the thing, right? You always set the release clause as way above the player's worth, and then you're hoping that someone will take the bait, quote unquote. And City are a team that can afford to take that bait and be like, okay, whatever, right? It's a speeding ticket for them.
I think Kovacic's run is coming to an end. I think De Bruyne is done. I think Gundo is done. I think Rodri also, once he comes back, he's good. City is prying for young people to come in and start again. And I think from that perspective, he fits in beautifully and he can have a long, sustained run at City. I think we already did the best transfer window by just holding on to the talent that will make that difference for us in years to come.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we talked about before the arrival of a new coach. We said the new coach, all he has to do is not break what Barca already have, the team, and nourish what we have. And the same goes for the president, right? He has to make sure that these talents, these players that are homegrown, especially homegrown players that have so much potential, retain them, make sure they are happy, and they are they want to play for the crest. And that's why I think people have so much issues and drama with the likes of Araujo and Frenkie, because there's always contract drama, right? It's not as simple as it was with Pedri and Gavi, who were like, okay, we love Barca, we want to play for Barca, we sign a thing, and it's done within a day. As you say, there's nothing there to it. Next time they say, okay, tomorrow they sign, and they actually do sign the contract tomorrow, and that's it. And I think that's why these players, Frenkie and Araujo, why people are so quick to judge them and highlight their flaws, because there's so much bad faith there. There's so much insecurity.
I think Kubarsi, Lamine, Rafinha, Pedri, Bernal, Casido. If that is taken care of, and Araujo, if he stays, you can build anything for the next 10 years.
Sure.
You can really build on it for the next 10, 15 years, which is amazing. So big kudos to Laporta and Deco for just what they've done in this window. Even if you don't get a single transfer from somewhere, I think they did the most important thing with the least amount of noise. And that's amazing. And that hopefully that's the best news for us. And with that, we'll come down to the end of this episode. So stay tuned. Take care. We'll be back on the Alaves game, and we'll be covering that live. So please join us. That'll be good. Until then, take care and Visca Barca.